Montana Territory, 1875. Wind whipped through the tall grass surrounding the widow Amelia's modest homestead, where her daughter Victoria Anderson stood on the porch, shading her eyes against the harsh midday sun. At 21 years of age, Victoria possessed a quiet strength beyond her years, her honey-blonde hair escaping its practical bun to frame a face both delicate and determined. The deep blue calico dress she wore had been mended several times, but was kept meticulously clean, a testament to her pride despite their humble circumstances. Victoria had witnessed more suffering than most young women her age, having nursed her father through his final days after a mining accident 3 years prior. Since then, she and her mother had managed to keep their small ranch operational through sheer determination and the occasional help of passing cowhands. The experience had left Victoria with a firmly entrenched belief: love brought only pain and loss on the frontier. Better to remain self-sufficient and avoid such attachments entirely. The West was no place for tender emotions, only practical partnerships and daily survival. "Rider coming," her mother called from the doorway. Victoria squinted at the approaching figure, slumped precariously in the saddle. As the horse drew closer, she could see dark stains on the rider's shirt. "Blood." "Mother, prepare the table," Victoria instructed, hurrying down the steps. "We have an injured man." The horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, stopped just short of the homestead, as if recognizing sanctuary. Its rider, a young man no more than 25, listed dangerously to one side, his handsome face ashen beneath a layer of trail dust. Without warning, he slipped from the saddle, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Victoria rushed forward, kneeling beside the unconscious stranger. His features were strikingly handsome despite his current state: strong jaw with just a hint of stubble, straight nose, and thick lashes now closed against pain. His shirt was soaked through with blood from what appeared to be a bullet wound in his shoulder. "Xavier," he mumbled deliriously as she pressed a handkerchief to the wound. "Xavier Weston." "You're safe now, Mr. Weston," Victoria said firmly, though she wasn't certain he could hear her. "Mother, help me get him inside." Together, the two women managed to half-drag, half-carry the injured cowboy into their modest home. Victoria had become an efficient nurse through necessity, and within minutes, she had cut away Xavier's blood-soaked shirt to reveal a muscular chest and the angry wound at his shoulder. "Looks like the bullet went clean through," her mother observed, placing a basin of hot water on the table beside him. "Lucky man." Victoria nodded grimly. "Lucky so far. We'll see if infection sets in." As she cleansed the wound, Victoria couldn't help but notice the other scars that marked his body, testimony to a hard life on the frontier. Whatever Xavier Weston was running from, it wasn't his first brush with violence. Another reason to maintain her distance once he was patched up. Men who attracted trouble had no place in her carefully ordered world. "What do you think happened to him?" her mother asked. Victoria shrugged. "Robbery, perhaps. Or a disagreement turned ugly. Doesn't matter. We'll patch him up, get him on his feet, and send him on his way. We've got the spring planting to worry about." But deep inside, as she worked meticulously to clean and bandage his wound, Victoria couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity about the handsome stranger who had literally fallen at her doorstep. For 3 days, Xavier drifted in and out of consciousness, burning with fever. Victoria stayed by his side, cooling his brow with damp cloths and forcing broth between his cracked lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. On the 4th morning, she entered the small spare room to find him awake, his eyes, a striking shade of green, clear and alert for the first time. "You've been watching over me," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Victoria nodded, maintaining a professional demeanor as she approached to check his bandages. "Someone had to. You were half dead when you arrived." "I'm in your debt, Miss Anderson." "Victoria Anderson." A small smile touched his lips. "I thank you for your care, Miss Anderson." Victoria busied herself checking his wound, avoiding those penetrating eyes. "The bullet passed clean through. You're healing well, but you need rest." "I'm afraid rest is a luxury I can't afford," Xavier said, attempting to sit up before a grimace of pain stopped him. "There are men. There are always men," Victoria interrupted, firmly pressing him back onto the pillow. "And they'll still be there after you've properly healed, unless you'd prefer to face them as a corpse." For a moment, surprise flickered across Xavier's face before he let out a short laugh. You don't mince words. Mincing words doesn't get the chores done, she replied, though her tone had softened slightly. Now, can you manage some solid food? Mother's made stew. Over the following days, Xavier regained his strength, though Victoria maintained her careful distance. She learned he was a cattle driver who had separated from his outfit to deliver a message when he was ambushed. The money he'd been carrying, payment for a small herd, had been stolen, but he'd managed to escape with his life. Why didn't they finish the job? Victoria asked bluntly one evening as she changed his bandage. Xavier's eyes darkened. They thought they had. I played dead until they rode off, then managed to climb back on my horse. You're fortunate your horse found its way here. Fortune had nothing to do with it, Xavier replied. That horse is smarter than most men I know. When I couldn't stay conscious any longer, I just whispered find help and gave him his head. Victoria felt a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Then I'm glad you have a wise horse. 2 weeks after Xavier's arrival, Victoria found him in the barn, attempting to saddle his horse despite his still healing shoulder. The sight of him struggling, his face set in determination despite the pain evident in every movement, stirred something unexpected within her. You'll tear your stitches, she said from the doorway. Xavier turned, his expression a mixture of frustration and embarrassment at being caught. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. And you think dying on the trail will somehow repay that hospitality? She approached, taking the saddle from his hands. At least wait until you can lift this without wincing. Their hands touched briefly, and Victoria felt an unfamiliar warmth rush through her. She stepped back quickly, disconcerted. I'm not accustomed to being in someone's debt, Xavier admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. Then work it off, Victoria suggested impulsively. My father's been gone 3 years, and there's always more work than hands around here. You can help with repairs until you're fully healed. Xavier studied her face, as if searching for something beyond her practical offer. Why would you trust a stranger like that? I don't trust you, Victoria replied honestly, but I trust your sense of honor. You wouldn't have been so desperate to leave if you didn't feel obligated. So put that obligation to good use instead of killing yourself trying to avoid it. A slow smile spread across Xavier's face. Miss Anderson, I believe that's the most sensible proposition I've heard in years. Spring on the Montana frontier brought endless work, and despite her initial reservations, Victoria found Xavier's presence increasingly valuable. Though still favoring his injured shoulder, he proved himself adept at a multitude of tasks, mending fences, repairing the leaking roof, even helping with the vegetable garden. His easy manner and willingness to tackle any job gradually began to soften Victoria's careful reserve. One evening, as sunset painted the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, Victoria found Xavier on the porch, whittling a small piece of wood. His deft hands shaped it with surprising gentleness, revealing the figure of a horse that bore a striking resemblance to his own mount. You have talent, she observed, settling beside him on the step. Xavier shrugged modestly. Just something to keep my hands busy during quiet evenings on the trail. Is that what you want? Victoria asked. To always be on the move? He was silent for a long moment, his hands stilling. I used to think so. Freedom seemed like the most important thing a man could have. And now, Xavier's green eyes met hers, unexpectedly earnest. Now I'm not so certain. These past weeks, I've seen something different. Something I never thought much about. What's that? Rootedness. Purpose beyond the next paycheck or destination. He gestured toward the small homestead. What you and your mother have built here, it matters. It endures. Victoria felt an unwelcome flutter in her chest at his words. It's also vulnerable, she countered. One bad season, one raid, one accident, and everything can be lost. Xavier studied her face in the fading light. Is that why you keep everyone at arm's length? Fear of loss. The question struck too close to Victoria's carefully guarded heart. She stood abruptly. It's getting late. Mother will be wondering where I am. But that night, sleep eluded her. Xavier's question echoed in her mind, forcing her to confront the walls she'd built around her heart since her father's death. The cowboy's presence was becoming a dangerous complication in her carefully ordered world. The following afternoon, Victoria was gathering eggs when she heard the distant sound of approaching horses. Moving to the barn door, she spotted 3 riders approaching, rough-looking men with the unmistakable bearing of trouble. Her heart raced as she recognized the leader as the notorious Jensen brothers, cattle thieves, and worse. "Mother," she called urgently, heading for the house. "Get the rifle." Xavier emerged from the workshop where he'd been repairing tools, his expression changing instantly when he saw the riders. "Victoria, get inside. Now." "This is my home," she objected. "I won't. Those are the men who shot me," Xavier said grimly. "They've tracked me here." Fear clutched at Victoria's heart, not for herself, but unexpectedly for Xavier. "You're still injured. You can't face them." His hand gently but firmly guided her toward the house. "I won't let them threaten you and your mother. This is my fight." The riders halted a short distance from the house, spreading out in a menacing semicircle. The leader, a heavily scarred man with cold eyes, called out, "Weston, we know you're here. Come out and face what's coming to you." Xavier stepped into the yard, his stance casual but alert. Victoria watched from the window, rifle in hand, as he faced the men who had nearly killed him. "Looking for something, Jensen?" Xavier called. "You know damn well what we want," Jensen snarled. "The money you stole." Victoria's breath caught. Xavier had told her he was carrying payment for cattle when ambushed, not that he was the thief. "Funny," Xavier replied, his voice carrying easily across the yard. "I was about to say the same to you. That money belongs to the Whitman Ranch, payment for their herd. You're the thieves here." Jensen spat on the ground. "Don't matter how you dress it up. Hand it over, and maybe we'll let these women live." Victoria felt a cold rage replace her fear. She opened the door, rifle raised despite Xavier's warning glare. "This is Anderson land. You're not welcome here." Jensen's ugly laugh grated in the tense air. "Well, look at this. Got yourself a proper little lioness, Weston." His eyes traveled over Victoria in a way that made her skin crawl. "Maybe we'll take more than the money." Xavier's voice hardened. "You won't take anything, Jensen. The money's gone, sent to its rightful owners while you were busy celebrating your ambush. You've wasted your time." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats before Jensen nodded almost imperceptibly to his companions. As they reached for their weapons, Xavier dove sideways, drawing his own pistol with lightning speed despite his injured shoulder. The yard erupted in gunfire. Victoria fired at one of Jensen's men, clipping his arm and causing him to drop his weapon. Her mother appeared at the corner of the house, her own rifle barking as she provided covering fire. Xavier had taken down one man and was exchanging shots with Jensen when the third outlaw circled behind the barn. Victoria spotted him just as he took aim at Xavier's back. Without hesitation, she swung her rifle and fired, hitting the man squarely in the chest. He collapsed in the dust as Jensen, seeing his advantage lost, turned to flee. Xavier's final shot caught him in the leg, sending him tumbling from his horse. In the sudden silence that followed, Victoria found herself trembling, the rifle heavy in her hands. Xavier approached Jensen's prone form cautiously, kicking away his gun before turning to Victoria with concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. She shook her head, unable to speak. The danger had passed, but the realization that she had killed a man, that she might have lost Xavier, left her shaken to her core. Later, after the sheriff had been summoned and Jensen taken into custody, Victoria found Xavier by the creek that bordered their property. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water as he stood staring into the rippling current. "You saved my life today," he said without turning. "You would have done the same." Victoria moved to stand beside him, the events of the day having stripped away her usual reserve. "Was it true? About the money?" Xavier nodded. "I managed to hide it before I passed out that first day. Once I could move around, I arranged for it to be delivered to the Whitman Ranch. I couldn't risk those men tracking it here, to you." "You were protecting us all along," Victoria realized. "You gave me shelter when I had nothing to offer in return," Xavier said, finally turning to face her. "You tended my wounds, trusted me despite every reason not to." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How could I not try to protect what matters most?" The words hung between them, laden with meaning beyond the immediate danger they'd faced. Victoria felt the careful walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. "I was wrong," she admitted softly. "About what?" "About the frontier being no place for love." Victoria took a step closer to him. "I watched my father die, and I decided that loving anyone out here was just asking for heartbreak. That remaining alone was safer." Xavier reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. And now I realize that the danger is always there, whether you love or not. Her voice strengthened with conviction. But facing it alone, that's the real tragedy. Before he could respond, Victoria closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that spoke more eloquently than words of her newfound understanding. Xavier's arms encircled her, holding her as if she were precious beyond measure. When they finally parted, Xavier looked at her with wonder. "I never expected to find you," he said. "I was just passing through. Another job, another paycheck. But the moment I opened my eyes and saw you watching over me, something changed." Victoria smiled, the expression transforming her face with a joy she hadn't allowed herself to feel for years. "Perhaps your wise horse knew exactly where to bring you." Summer brought changes to the Anderson homestead. With the reward money for capturing the notorious Jensen gang, Xavier invested in expanding the ranch operations. The barn was expanded, a small herd of cattle purchased, and 2 hired hands brought on to help with the increased workload. Victoria watched with growing affection as Xavier threw himself into building their future, his natural leadership and easy rapport with the workers transforming the struggling homestead into a thriving operation. More importantly, he had brought laughter back into their home, something Victoria hadn't realized was missing until its return. One evening in late August, Xavier suggested a ride to watch the sunset from the ridge overlooking the valley. As they reached the summit, Victoria gasped at the spectacle below. Wildflowers carpeted the valley in a riot of colors, painting the landscape in vibrant hues. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Xavier helped her dismount, his touch lingering. "I found this place last week when tracking a stray calf. I knew you'd appreciate it." They settled on a blanket Xavier had packed. The valley spread before them like a living painting. As the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the landscape, Xavier turned to Victoria with an unusually serious expression. "I've been thinking about what you said by the creek that day," he began. "About facing danger alone being the real tragedy." Victoria nodded, her heart quickening at the intensity in his eyes. "I've spent most of my life moving from place to place, never setting down roots," Xavier continued. "I told myself it was freedom, but really, it was fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of caring too much about something I might lose." He took her hands in his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Until I met you, I didn't understand what it meant to have something worth fighting for, worth staying for." Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden carving, a delicate rose fashioned from the local pine. "I'm not a wealthy man, Victoria. I can't offer you diamonds or gold." He placed the wooden rose in her palm. "But I can offer you my heart, my hands, and a promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes as Xavier knelt before her. "Victoria Anderson, will you make me the happiest man in the territory and become my wife?" The question hung in the air between them, pregnant with possibility. For a moment, Victoria thought of all the reasons to say no: the uncertainty of frontier life, the pain she had known, the risks of opening her heart so completely. But as she looked into Xavier's earnest eyes, she realized that the greatest risk would be denying the love that had bloomed between them against all odds. "Yes," she whispered, her voice growing stronger as certainty filled her. "Yes, Xavier Weston, I will marry you." His smile was brighter than the setting sun as he slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, a modest but meaningful token of their commitment. As he drew her into his arms, Victoria marveled at how completely her world had changed since the day a wounded cowboy had fallen at her doorstep. They were married in October, when the aspens turned golden and the first hint of winter crispness touched the air. The small church in the nearest town was filled with neighbors, friends, and even some of Xavier's former trail companions who had ridden considerable distances to witness the union. Victoria wore a dress of ivory silk that her mother had somehow managed to procure, her honey-blonde hair adorned with wildflowers. When she appeared at the church door on the arm of their neighbor Mr. Thompson, who had stepped in to give her away, Xavier's face transformed with such naked adoration that several of the ladies in attendance dabbed at their eyes. "I thought you were beautiful the first moment I saw you," Xavier whispered as she joined him at the altar, "even though I was half dead and could barely see straight." Victoria laughed softly. "I thought you were trouble. You weren't wrong, he replied with a wink. The minister cleared his throat meaningfully, and they turned to face him with matching expressions of barely contained joy. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to stand together through the hardships and joys of frontier life. When Xavier slid the silver band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes certain. Victoria had never felt more secure, despite the uncertain world around them. The celebration afterward was a true frontier gathering. Tables laden with food contributed by neighbors, fiddle music that had even the most reserved guests tapping their feet, and enough good wishes to carry the newlyweds through a lifetime. As evening fell and lanterns were lit around the Anderson homestead, now the Weston ranch, Xavier led his bride in a dance beneath the stars. Victoria, who had once believed that love had no place in the harsh realities of the frontier, found herself surrounded by the community that had formed around them, secure in the arms of the man who had taught her that love wasn't a liability, but the greatest strength of all. "Happy, Mrs. Weston?" Xavier murmured against her hair. Victoria looked up at him, at the face that had become as essential to her as breathing. "More than I ever believed possible." The following spring brought new growth to the Weston ranch. Fields were planted, cattle grazed contentedly on the expanding pasture land, and the homestead itself had been enlarged with a new wing added to accommodate the future family they both hoped for. One morning, as dawn broke over the eastern hills, Victoria stood on the porch of their home, a secret smile playing on her lips. Behind her, the door opened, and Xavier's strong arms encircled her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You're up early," he observed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Victoria turned in his arms, her eyes bright with news she could no longer contain. "I have something to tell you." Xavier's brow furrowed slightly at her serious tone. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," Victoria assured him, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat abdomen. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Xavier stood absolutely still, his expression one of stunned wonder. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled the chickens in the nearby yard, he lifted Victoria and spun her around, his laughter mingling with hers in the clear morning air. "A baby," he repeated in awe when he finally set her down. "Our baby." Victoria nodded, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Due in the fall, the doctor says." Xavier knelt before her, pressing a reverent kiss to her stomach before looking up with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" Victoria asked, running her fingers through his dark hair. "For healing me, not just my wounds, but my heart." Xavier rose to his feet, cradling her face in his calloused hands. "For teaching me that love isn't something to fear or avoid, but to embrace. For making me the happiest man in all the territories." As they stood together on the porch of the home they had built, watching the sun illuminate the land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving, Victoria marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From a wounded stranger and a wary widow's daughter to husband and wife, soon to be parents, their story was woven into the very fabric of the frontier they had both once believed too harsh for love. "We have come a long way," she murmured. Xavier's arm tightened around her shoulders as he gazed out at their thriving ranch. "And we're just getting started." In the distance, a meadowlark began to sing, its clear notes rising above the awakening landscape. Victoria leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the frontier might still hold, they would face them together. Two hearts that had found in each other the healing, the home, and the love they had never dared to seek.